Hi, I'm Brad Crispin. I'm a volunteer for the Southwest Seattle Historical Society, and I'm here today with Nancy McPhee.
Yes.
Nancy is also a volunteer for the Historical Society, and Nancy, you have lived in the West Seattle area pretty much your whole life.
My whole life, since 1926.
All right. The reason we're here with Nancy today is that she has kindly agreed to show us some of her old photographs and tell some stories about growing up in the Fauntleroy area, and also about the years when she and her husband John ran a neighborhood pharmacy up in Arbor Heights. So, you ready to get started?
I am ready.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, so this is our first picture, and it looks like you are about 3 years old.
Right. I was all dressed up, ready to go to a wedding.
Ah, whose wedding?
Isabel and Lawrence Pierce's wedding at their home.
Oh.
At the Coleman estate, really.
Okay, so Isabel, until she was married, she was Isabel Coleman.
Right.
And she was marrying Lawrence
Pierce.
Do you remember getting all dressed up and ready to go to the wedding, or?
Not really. That was a long time ago.
Sure.
Well, no, I don't remember. Yeah, I remember parts of the wedding, but I don't remember a lot of it. I was only 3.
Yeah. Do you remember why did they invite you to be the flower girl?
Well, we were. My aunt was her maid of honor, and my uncle was in the wedding, and they were good friends of my parents, and they thought I was cute.
Well, you were, and so your maiden name was Sibley.
Sibley,
Nancy
yes.
Sibley.
Right.
And your grandparents.
My grandparents had a summer place on the beach at Endeline, and then as their sons grew up, they didn't want to come out here for just the summer anymore.
Oh, okay.
So they moved into the cabin, and shortly, I don't know how long they lived in the cabin, but after that they moved into the big house up above the ferry dock.
Okay. And for the time when they were maybe particularly on the beach at first, that's when they got to know the Coleman family.
Right.
Okay. So the next picture here is, it's the wedding party, and there you are.
I am, yes.
And can you identify some of the people who are in the picture?
Okay. This is my Aunt Bernice. This is Lawrence. This is Isabel. This is Isabel's father, Mr. Coleman. One of these ladies is Elizabeth Taylor, who was a cousin of Isabel's. I think this was my uncle, Ellsworth. And I don't remember who these people are. But it was a family affair, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great, and it was in the Coleman
It was in the big
home.
Coleman house, yeah, in front of the fireplace. We're standing in front of the fireplace. And it's pretty much the same today. I was in there for the open house, and it was pretty much the same. Of course,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time there as I was growing up, because they had children that I knew, and then we played together.
Oh. So you later, as you were growing up, you visited this house often, played in it, got to know the kids.
Oh yeah, yeah. I knew all of the Pierce children, all of Coleman. Mr. Coleman's. Oh, there must be Ken Coleman. Must be here someplace. Yeah, I was wrong. Must be Ken, Isabel's brother, and this would be my uncle, because he's already starting to lose his hair.
Okay. And then you're quite a bit younger than Isabel, but did you get to know her later in life too?
She and I got to be good friends. We played bridge together, and she sang at my wedding.
Wow.
And so we stayed good friends, and of course Lawrence too.
And your families, in addition to being located both here in the Fauntleroy area, you both also had summer places over on Horsehead Bay.
On Horsehead Bay, yeah. They had Camp Coleman, and the Fauntleroy group went over there every year, and as a camp, and we had the little cove next door, because Mr. Coleman decided he would sell some of his property off, so he came to my grandfather and offered him a first choice, and so for a long time we had a nice place on Horsehead Bay.
Oh, that's great. And Horsehead Bay is over on Kitsap Peninsula?
Kitsap Peninsula. In these days, it's on the other side of the Narrows Bridge, and if you want to go to Gig Harbor, you turn right. If you want to go to Camp Coleman, you turn left off of the highway.
Gotcha. So lots of connections between the Sibley family and the Coleman family.
Right. And there's the house that they moved up from the beach.
Your parents or your
My
grandparents moved up. Yeah.
They had 8 children, and by the time they moved into this house, the one boy had died in infancy. So there were 7 children that they raised in this house. This is just above the ferry dock.
Do you remember your grandparents' house on the beach before this, or do you
No.
pretty much just remember this?
The only thing I remember about that house is they decided to tear it down. It was made with beechwood, driftwood,
Oh, golly.
and so they decided to sell that property, and I went and helped my grandfather. I was a little girl, not very big, and so I went down and helped tear the house down. That's all I remember of it.
And what do you remember about this house?
Oh, lots. We lived there frequently. Well, twice we lived there for a while. It being during the Depression. Once in a while we had to go in and share housing. And so I went to school from here, walked up that dirt road there. That's Henderson.
Okay.
And the school is right up there above that. So I walked to school in the morning.
So this house is still there today. It's the corner of Fauntleroy Way and Henderson.
Right.
Right above the ferry dock.
Right above the ferry dock. And that big tree there is not there anymore. So.
Oh. Do you know the history of this house? Of who built it?
As far as I know, the house was built by the family Wallenweber. And they lived there for a while, not very long, and my grandparents bought it from them.
Okay.
And the grandchild of the Wallenwebers was my age, and we were best friends. She was in my wedding.
Oh, what was her name?
Pat.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a grand old house.
It is.
To this day, it's
Got
interesting to see.
three bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs that you can see, and in back there's a sort of an add-on, and it has a great big bedroom up there too.
You can see in the far background there's not as many houses.
Yeah, that's Folly Hills.
It's Folly Hills, right, where there's lots of houses now, but it was just woods back then.
Right. And that's my sister Pat. This is Pat. And this is her friend Mary Wilson Bassetti. And but she was only Mary Wilson then.
Mm-hmm.
And they were sitting in the front of Mary's house, which is still there, also above the ferry dock, a big brown shake house. And over here is Lincoln Park, and they hadn't put the pool in it yet. So that's all Lincoln Park there.
Yeah, sort of see the shape of it, yeah. Interesting. And this was, you said, just about a block away from the house,
My grandparents' house, right. So.
Pretty cute.
Yeah. Oh my. And there we are in front of the Fauntleroy Church parsonage. The pastor lived here. And then over here, can you see that?
Yeah.
Was the church and the Y. At that time it wasn't the Y, it was Jim. And this was the group I was in, my club group. Right
Can
here.
you identify some of the people in it?
Right here is Pearl Ebert. And Pearl has been also, she's passed away just recently. And her husband was he owned the Ebert Shell Station.
Okay.
On 35th.
Now, was she Ebert yet, or was she still?
She
what
was
was her maiden name?
Hesse.
Was she married yet? You think here? She's the leader for.
I think she was pretty young then.
Okay.
And this is Regis Schultz. And this is Floribel Key's older sister, Genevieve. And Floribel's a volunteer also.
Yeah, for the historical study, yeah.
Right. Here I am.
Okay.
This is my friend Joanne, and she lived across the street from the park in one of the new brick houses. They're now very old. I think this was Dora Dean Gustafson. She was on the way up to Arbor Heights. Helen Loridis lived 2 houses away from Joanne.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Jane Yerkes. She lived on Barton, going up the hill. I think this was Frances Gailey, who lived down on Fauntleroy, just up beyond the ferry dock. Did I say that this was Regis Schultz? She also lived in one of the brick houses across from the park. And I don't remember some of the others.
Okay. And what were you girls all doing sitting there that day?
Oh, we had been asked to sit there by Dr. Kilburn, an old-time Seattleite, quite a well-known person in Seattle. And he was an old dentist, an elderly man, and he loved to take pictures. And this picture was taken with his panorama camera. And the camera was big and long and skinny. So that's what we remember. This here, this goes up to Forest Court. It's a path that went up to where Forest Court is now. And I think now that path has been moved, and there's a road that comes up here and a lot of houses along in here.
Okay. So this group it was kind of a weekly gym and club group?
Right. We went to gym, and we went to club, and then we went to manual training.
Manual training.
Manual training. We learned to handle tools, power tools and hammers and saws, and how to make something according to a pattern.
Huh. So I remember when you were telling me about this before one other time, I wasn't too surprised that they would do a program like that for boys, but to have, back in that day, to have girls come in and learn how to use power tools, bandsaws, drill presses.
I don't know why he did that,
woodworking.
but Mr. Coleman felt it was really important. And Mr. Coleman kind of oversaw this program, supplied all the tools, and we had to take in process of doing our woodworking, we would go over and ask for a tool, and he would inspect what we had done. And it had to be perfect. Then we could go on to the next step. And he handed out candy at the end of every
And Mr.
program.
Coleman, this was Lawrence Coleman.
Yeah, Lawrence Coleman.
So he was really interested in doing programs for young people because there was this group, and he ran the manual training shop.
Yeah.
And there was also Camp Coleman. And what did you have to do to qualify to go to Camp Coleman?
Camp Coleman, you had to be a member of this group. And then you had to attend church, and you couldn't miss more than 3 Sundays of Sunday school, and you had to have $1.50 for a week at Camp Coleman, and all the transportation over and back. We went over on his 90-foot yacht, the Osprey, and he took all of the campers on that, and as you grew up, you became one of the leaders, and you had to watch over the little kids that they didn't fall off
That's
the
great.
boat.
I remember going to Camp Coleman when I was a kid, but it was a different location by then.
Right.
And it was run more by the YMCA and the Fauntleroy Community Council.
And they went over by bus.
And then we went over by bus. So kind of a different experience than riding on the Coleman's yacht to go to the Horsehead Bay.
Right.
But still a lot of fun. And it's a
It
great
was
picture.
it was a wood-burning steamship.
Wow.
So
And this picture here, I think, if you know the Fauntleroy Church and YMCA today, the gymnasium that's there now, I believe, is the same gymnasium that was there, but they moved it.
moved it back behind where the church, where the there's a little chapel, and then they moved the Y back behind that.
What do you remember about the old gym?
Oh, it had rafters.
Yeah?
And there was a ladder at the end of the gym, and you could climb the ladder and run around in the rafters, but you better not be caught doing it.
Yeah, that sounds dangerous.
If you played badminton, my dad played in the adult program, and they would get their badminton shuttlecocks caught up in the rafters. And one night my dad says, Nancy, run up there in the rafters and knock the shuttlecocks back down. I don't like heights. But my dad had told me to do it. So I did. I climbed up in the rafters and was throwing the shuttlecocks back down to the players when in walked an old friend of mine, an old member of the community with a strange guy. And I was in college at the time. And I met him and married him.
So that was John,
That was John.
your husband. Interesting.
Right. And he was in the school of pharmacy.
Oh.
Well, he was in the school of forestry at the time that we met and married, and then he decided we should have more money than forestry would provide us. So he went in, he thought he'd become a doctor, but then we had a child and we had to have more money again. And so he went in from there into pharmacy, and we're glad he did. We enjoyed being pharmacists. I enjoyed being a pharmacist's wife. He enjoyed being a pharmacist. So that's me. I think I was probably in junior high school, living in the house my parents finally bought. And as you can see, we can see the ferry boat would docked right down in here. So we could see a lot. My sister by this time was in a wheelchair with arthritis, and so she could sit here on the deck, on the porch, and just enjoy the view. We had moved from this house across the street. I never lived very far away from one place to another. So there's where we moved from there up across the street to here. Yeah, the bell came off my dad's sailboat called the Nellie Mae. And he and his brothers used to sail it out in the bay, and my grandmother would go to call them for dinner, and there'd be no place in sight, which meant they'd probably gone behind Blake Island and gotten becalmed.
Oh.
And they very often did that, and Grandma just got pretty casual about the whole thing. One of her sisters came out from Ohio one time and was really frantic, and Grandma kept saying, "No, they're just becalmed. They'll be home in the morning." And I guess I never saw the Nellie Mae, but that was the bell that was on it.
How long did you live in this house?
Oh, we probably lived there a good 10 years, maybe longer. My parents lived there quite a bit longer because that's the house I was living in when we were married.
And so in addition to this house, you lived in several other houses around
Right.
Fauntleroy area early on, right?
Like I say, I lived across the street here, and then a couple blocks, well, it's directly in front of the house I live in now, down on 47th. And I lived directly across the street on Brace Point Drive from the church and the Y. That was easy. I could walk hard. I could come home for lunch, and I could walk to the Y, to the gym in just a big hurry. And it was quick to the beach in the summer, so it was a nice place to live.
And you're junior high age here,
I
or
think
something?
probably about that, yeah.
You went to Madison.
I went to James Madison and West Seattle.
And so here you are, a high schooler.
Actually, I was a freshman at the university,
Oh, okay.
and I had taken this job with George Henriksen, seen here, in his little corner pharmacy down on the corner of Wildwood and 45th.
Okay. So right down there on where the beauty salon is in that.
Right,
that
same building,
building
same
now.
shop. And I was better known as the soda jerk, and I wore bobby socks.
So that was your job in the pharmacy, was a soda jerk.
Right. learned to make a soda and draw Cokes from the machine, and when we had a earthquake one time, I learned to put bottles back on shelves.
Wow. And did you, how did you get this job with Mr. Hendrickson?
Well, he lived 2 houses away from us. So one day I was in there, said I wanted a job, and he said, okay.
That was easy.
I knew that the kid that was working for him was going to have to give his job up, so
Okay.
I did that. And that's my husband in front of the very same pharmacy after he had graduated. He worked in this little pharmacy for a long time. Not for a long time, just a short time. And George then opened up the new one up on Arbor Heights, and it became Arbor Heights Pharmacy.
Oh, so tell me again about the houses in the background.
Yeah, they were built shortly just before this picture was taken. So they're still there. You still pretty well see them. And then these cars down in front would indicate to me that John graduated from the university in '49. So apparently those are 40 cars built around 1949. The one looks like a Volkswagen. An old Volkswagen with the little windows in the back.
So you were saying that John, he didn't start off to be a pharmacist.
No. He came home from the war, as many of the young men did, really fed up with big crowds and noises and the whole shooting match that war does to young people. And said he wanted to live out in the forest. And I said, well, we were going to get married. And he said, that he wanted to do that. And I said, no. I said, I want to be in town. So he then decided that he would go back to his original choice of being a doctor. But I was pregnant with a baby, and so we needed a little more money. And so he switched from pre-med to pharmacy.
Okay.
Because you can go into a doctor program from pharmacy at the time. And so he took pharmacy, and then he went to work as a pharmacist, and that's the way it...
And interesting, but kind of a coincidence in a way, that the same pharmacy where you had worked as a soda jerk was the one where he
got his
started
first job.
career.
Right.
That's great.
And then eventually, George moved the whole business up to the top of Arbor Heights.
Well, I think that leads into our next photograph.
That's it. That was the old store at Arbor Heights, and then we purchased it from George.
So this was up in Arbor Heights on corner of 100th and 42nd.
Right, right. And you can see that we had a 1950 Plymouth.
Oh, yeah.
Or what? I was a 53. So this picture was taken in that time period.
Why would Mr. Hendrickson would have moved his pharmacy from where it was located down there
Fauntleroy.
in Fauntleroy up to Arbor Heights?
I don't remember that discussion. I don't remember why he
Seems like
moved.
Fauntleroy would be maybe a better location, but maybe not. Maybe there was a...
Well, it was a tiny little shop,
Oh.
and this was twice the size of the one down in Fauntleroy. And I guess the bakery was so well established we couldn't move into that. And at the time, this is a funny thing, at the time on Wildwood, there was a man there that had a hardware store.
Oh.
A kind of a hardware variety store. And it had lots of fun things in it. So I think probably there was just no place to expand to, and he needed more room.
All right. And so George Hendrickson built this place, and then you shortly after that bought it from
Bought it from him, yeah.
And there's another shot of the store.
And that was still while it was before we redid the outside. And there he is back in the pharmacy. It says 1951. I didn't realize these were all dated.
Yeah.
And he's in that day and age we had to compound quite a bit. So he was compounding a prescription of some kind. And I think that graduate went down to the museum to be used in any displays they wanted.
Yeah, I like that picture. It's and it really shows him in the middle of doing his job.
Yeah, right. It was before he decided to go back to the GI cut.
Let's see.
Now he's gone back to the GI haircut. But, we were out on a buying trip, and it was just probably in August, seeing as how I was sleeveless, and we would do our Christmas buying for the store and big shows that they would have. So I think that's what we were doing here.
So I guess that's one thing about running a drugstore is that it's a pharmacy, but you also sell all kinds of other items,
Right.
and you had to learn how to stock it and what to get and what not to
Right.
get. Was that hard to figure out?
Yeah, I don't think we ever did genuinely figure it out. We sometimes would find ourselves with short of things, and sometimes we find we bought way too much. But it usually got sold.
You had some experience as a soda jerk. Did you have a soda fountain here in this
And
location?
we had for a while, and then we found that we had a lot of the regular guys in the community, the milkman and the mailman, and the guys who did a lot of regular deliveries and would come in the morning and have a good social hour with coffee and maybe a donut. And one day we figured out my time and the amount of money that they had spent, which came to, and I think we had made $1.50 or something for that morning, and we decided that it really wasn't worth it, so we took the fountain out, which people got really angry with us, but
Yeah, they missed having the soda fountain there.
they missed, well, yeah.
And you,
Our kids did.
yeah, and you at that time you had a house that was just a couple blocks away
Right.
from here.
This is 42nd, and we lived on 100th and 39th.
And I think you told me another time that after you closed down the soda fountain, that some of the guys, the delivery guys and whatnot, that would come to the front, they'd come up and visit you at your house.
Right. And my husband
hang out.
went out there one day and looked up the street to see what was going on at the house, because somebody said there were a lot of cars up there. And he looked up there, and there were things like milk trucks and postal trucks, and and I think that morning we even had the insurance. You know, in the old days, the insurance man would come around and get the payments for that you were making monthly. So I think he was up there. Rudy, his name was Rudy.
So here's another shot inside of the pharmacy.
And there's Patty. No, she had had taken my place in the store. Didn't have to do the soda jerk thing, but she took care of all the front end stuff and helped John when he needed to file some stuff and that kind of thing. And that's another pharmacist. We got it to the point where we actually could hire a pharmacist, and John could take some time off. That was really nice. And so that was Bev, the pharmacist.
So you must have been doing pretty well in those days to be able to hire another pharmacist to be on your staff.
Well, it was marginal. We found that when we hired another pharmacist, we had lots more time on our hands and we could enjoy each other's company, but we didn't have as much money. But if we didn't have the pharmacist, we didn't have any time together, but we had more money, so we kind of had a pharmacist for a while.
Well, and I guess that's the same.
Yeah,
her again.
I can't. We had another pharmacist for a while, and I think.
It does say Bev on top of the photo there. So
Oh, Bev. Okay, then it is Bev.
But you don't see many family-owned neighborhood pharmacies anymore.
None. The last one in Seattle, as far as we know, was Mike's West Side Pharmacy. And Mike and his wife had both been mentored by John, and they had worked for us for a while, so I guess we did have other pharmacists. And so Yeah, it was one of the last ones. Mike's was the last one, and ours was before there.
Now, you and John ran this pharmacy from about 1951 to 1966 or so?
66, yeah. And that's Kurt. He was, again, one of the young people that came and worked. Right now he's in the back room. And he was a young man, and he was very personable. We enjoyed having him work for us. And there's Bev again.
There's Bev again, and that's sort of a view of behind the counter where the pharmacist works.
Right. And this is the stacks where John kept all the partial, in the pharmacy they just have partial bottles, and you count out from the bottle. And so that was what that was. And that was Bonnie. And was worked for us for 15 years. She came to work for us temporarily to fill in when her husband was on strike at the steel mill. And 15 years later, she was still pretty temporary. But I had grown up and gone to school with her, and she was a great gal. She loved to do the displays. We had the cosmetics, and she always handled the cosmetics and the gifts, and she loved wrapping packages for people. And there was a time when Bonnie had gone home. It was after we'd closed the store, and a man came in and knocked on the door and said he wanted to buy some cigarettes. And John, being a tender-hearted guy that he was, let him come in. Well, along with him, unbeknownst to John, there were two other guys, and they came up this aisle here.
Hold on a sec.
And back of this wall was the stockroom where we checked articles in. My dad was back there, and he was checking stuff in the books, and this guy pulled a gun out, and he held it on John, and John said, "What are you doing?" And just then my dad says, "What's going on out there?" And the guy with the gun said, "Don't move or I'll shoot your buddy." Well, Dad was kind of a cocky little guy, and he came out around the corner, and he says, "What's going on out here?" And the guy didn't shoot, but he held him at bay and started going into the safe. He didn't, at that time, drugs weren't that important, but there was money in there from Christmas. And he took the money that he found, which was just a short stack that John had been counting. The main Christmas receipts were on the counter in a big stack, and the man never looked there, and John kept twitching and keeping his eyes up. Finally, the man turned around, and they started running out, and they ran across in front of the big plate glass windows, and John pulled a gun out of his belt that my dad didn't know he had, and shot through the plate glass window, through the guy's leather jacket, and little known to us, he did manage to shoot that one guy. And John ran to the door and saw a car pulling away in a hurry. He was pulling away in a hurry because he'd heard the gun. And John shot through the back window of the car, and we found out it was one of our customers. But things were easier in those days, and the customer forgave him. He forgave him because John had the window in his car repaired. And anyway, probably a month later, my dad it wasn't that much. Shortly after the New Year, Dad went in and parked his car at the old valet parking across from Frederick's. And when he went to pick it up, lo and behold, the man who had the gun, he was just a kid, delivered the car to my dad. So he quietly got into his car and drove up to his office and called the sheriffs, and they came down and arrested him. And by that way, we got all of the other two kids, really. And when they took him to jail and he took his jacket off, they found that he had indeed a bullet wound in his shoulder.
Wow.
And it had festered because he wouldn't go to the doctor.
So when John had shot through the plate glass window at this guy as he was running out the store. He managed to get him in the arm.
Sure, shoulder,
Wow,
yeah.
that's a pretty good shot.
Yeah, well, he was kind of surprised too.
Ah.
But anyway,
Did you have many other incidents like that at the
we had
pharmacy?
2 other burglaries, but not, we weren't in the store at the time. And then we started leaving the dog in the store, and the dog didn't like people coming up to the window, so he scared them. His bark was worse than his bite.
Well, that's not a great memory, but I imagine you have a lot of fond memories of
Oh,
running
yeah,
the store.
so many people that we have grown to know and love, and when we had to close the store because there was too much competition going on and we were kind of off the beaten track. So we closed the store and people would come and stand in the middle of that aisle that you see there and cry. And then John would say, well, I haven't seen you lately. It's good to see you. Well, I really have been going down to Pay and Save or something. And there's our daughter. Our children all worked with us at one time or another, and that's Patty. She was a little tiny thing, never got to, because she had had some serious illnesses. But she was a pretty dedicated worker for us, and we enjoyed having her there.
And your other kids worked in the store at different times
her
also?
younger sister started working there when she was still, when she got to about Patty's age. And she just loved working there because she could walk by the candy counter and she loved candy. So, yeah, Penny worked for us. And Dave, a little bit, but he never got old enough to really work for us before we sold the store.
Here's another shot behind the counter.
And that's where that was John's office, I want you to know. That was his big office. And there we decided that we would jazz the place up a little bit. So John did the awnings and he built the cover on the front and the letters, and he built these kind of log cabin types planters, and we planted those, and it looked better. It really looked a lot nicer then. So that was what we had just before we closed.
I think today people might recognize this building as it's the Brace Point Pottery.
Pottery shop,
And then next door to it, here's a picture that shows the building in color.
Yeah.
But there was a grocery store next to you
Right.
back then.
And now there's a house between. There's the grocery store and then an alley, and then a house is built right in here. And the house, they have put an entrance from the house into the store. And so whoever works in the store lives or owns the store lives in the house usually.
And what is in the grocery store in this picture, which is in the background, is today some kind of a church.
Church, right. And this is still at 42nd and 100th. And it was the year we had a big storm. And that's our car parked there. And it's melting away, but we did a lot of pharmacy deliveries at that time. Doesn't show the rear wheels, but I'm pretty sure John had the chains on so that he could get through the sloppy roads and take needed prescriptions to people. And right over here was the community clubhouse, which is also a church now. Right over there is the community clubhouse, and up in here, I guess that's a telephone. Oh, right here, you'll see the steeple of the Arbor Heights Alliance Church.
You mentioned deliveries. Was that a big part of your business back then? Was
right.
Because I imagine not every pharmacy would do deliveries.
Well, that was what kept us alive for a while. Was that people, and at this time, not everybody had 2 cars in their garage, and the kids would get sick, and the mother wouldn't be able to leave, and so John would take the prescriptions to the house. And that's the little house we lived in. You could, from this corner window here, you could see the pharmacy. And when I got dinner ready, I would wave to John and try to get somebody's attention. And he would come up and have dinner, and I would go down and work in the store until he got back. So that was how we worked dinner hour. But on Saturday night, he closed the store early so he could come home and have dinner with us. And oh, that was a big night. The kids just loved Saturday nights. And Dave was a tiny child up in this house, and wrestling would come on at 5 o'clock, and he would know that Daddy was going to be home pretty soon. So, and that lot now has and it was apple tree was here. I think somebody cut it down.
Oh.
And this was an apricot tree. We owned this lot too. Now it has a big house on it. This was our garage, and it opened onto the other street. And in the garage we had an old ice cream chest that used to have popsicles and that kind of thing, and the kids could come in and get the popsicles and come over and pay for them. And it said on the top, it said, "Help yourself." And so if I left the garage door open, I had this freezer in there full of meat that said, "Help yourself." But and now that there's a house there, and there's a lot more houses around it, neither the trees and the big weeping willow in back isn't there anymore either.
And this house was just a couple blocks east, maybe, of where the pharmacy was.
Right. It was on the highest lot in Arbor Heights, and the basement always flooded, and I never figured that out.
Huh. You were mentioning that when you sold the Arbor Heights pharmacy, John went to work at the new Pay and Save that was in the brand new Westwood Village at the time.
Right.
So were you still living in this house then?
66. No, we were down in the house we're presently in.
Mm-hmm. When he went to work for Pay and Save, that must have been kind of a shift for him from having run his own business to now working for a company, and there was sort of, I imagine there was pros and cons to that.
Well, there was a lot of the good, because all of a sudden we had paid vacations. We did not have to hire a pharmacist so we could go on a vacation. They paid us. That was just wonderful.
Yeah.
And we added to the business down at Pay and Save because we had some loyal customers, and they all came down to Pay and Save because that's where John was. Those things were a plus. And the other thing was he had regular hours. He only worked 40 hours a week, and that was a plus.
Okay.
But of course there were some other things that we didn't enjoy as much, but we did enjoy having the time and a little more money.
All right, so we're going to shift here a little bit, because this is back down in Fauntleroy.
This is at the Fauntleroy Church, and we had a cooperative playgroup down there. These children are all between 3 and 5 years old. It was a sunny day, so we'd taken, and the mothers helped here, and we had taken them outside to play between where the church is and where the gym is, and they were just a good group of kids.
Can you tell?
I'm trying to see. This is a little girl named R.C. Nichols. Her brother worked as the director of the Y for many years down in Fauntleroy.
Oh, George?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see. One of them was David, but I don't know. I think this is my son David here.
Okay, back of his head.
Yeah. And right now I can't, oh no, this is my daughter Patty. So these kids were an earlier group.
Yeah.
Then, so David wasn't in, that's why I can't pick David out, he's not there.
Okay. And then this next picture is almost taken from the same location, but it shows the
And the part that looks out on the garden and the trees, and
this part of the church was probably fairly
fairly new.
new
Yeah.
at this time. So just kind of a interesting
I'm looking
view,
at
because
the.
it's familiar. If you stand in that spot today, you definitely
Yeah.
recognize it, but it does look a bit different.
I'm looking at the windows, and I wonder if it was not quite finished.
Oh, you know what? I think you're right. It looks like it's
Not quite finished.
hard to tell. Yeah.
And this is the end of the line grocery store. And it's right at the end of the block where I live now, on 46th and Roxbury. And this end was a meat market, and this man had really fine meat. People would come from miles around to buy meat from him, and at one time this was the grocery store. But people kind of, when this picture was taken, was just before it was taken down, and people had been living in the grocery end.
Oh.
Down here at this end, you don't really see it, but there's the start of a pathway that runs diagonally across 2 lots and takes you to 47th Avenue Southwest. And from there you could take another path down to 48th, and then from there you could take either one of 2 sets of stairways that took you down to the beach. And so that was fun. We would and right here in this corner was why they called it end line. This is where the tracks went around in a big circle, and the trolley would come up here and go around in a great big circle and come back down the hill. So it was the end of the line.
And so we should explain a little. The Fauntleroy streetcar that came out from downtown, I think a lot of people figure that it ended down where the end of line Joe's is now,
Right.
in that neighborhood. But the end of the line was actually a couple blocks further up the
Right.
hill,
Uphill.
and that's where this building. And the reason you took this picture was because
They were gonna
all
tear
these
it
years
down.
later they were going to finally tear down that building.
Right.
But that's where the end of line turnaround was.
Right. And so, and I spent a lot of time walking up there and buying groceries and getting meat.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, the wasn't too developed yet up here. When we built up here, it was just kind of a little dirt road.
The Fauntleroy streetcar started in 1907, and then it ran up till about 1941, I think. But you remember riding on the
Oh, yeah.
Fauntleroy streetcar and other streetcars, right?
Right.
And so here's a picture of the number 2 Fauntleroy line, and it's along near Lincoln Park there.
Right. And you go by there and you'll still see those houses.
This picture looks like it's at about the place where the road turns, and there's this
Yeah,
tennis
I think
courts.
the gas
and,
station was right down in here. For a long time, the gas
Yeah.
station was there. That was the only, well, there was another little gas station in Fauntleroy, but that's how we got to town, was that way.
And here's another shot of the car, also somewhere down by Lincoln Park.
Yeah, and I think this was a waiting station. You waited for the bus here. And it looks like this is the track that the trolley is on, and then this was the bypass track. So if another trolley was coming the other way, they could pass. One would pull off onto the siding, and then
Oh, okay.
they'd pass.
And then this was how you got downtown. A lot of people, you'd ride the streetcar and it would go downtown.
Right?
And after it left West Seattle, it would ride that kind of high trestle across Spokane Street.
Right. And it was kind of scary because when you were sitting in the seat, you couldn't see this little rail, and it just looked like it went straight, well, it practically did anyway, straight to the beach. I mean, down to the road. But we didn't have to wait for the long, long freight trains to go by.
Ah.
And then it would also go over the tidal flats. So it was a good thing. Went down to 4th Avenue and it turned onto 4th Avenue. And I think it came back down someplace along 4th Avenue, came back down to earth.
Okay. Well, that's great, and I think that's the last picture in our series here. But we sure appreciate you taking time to show us some pictures and tell us some stories. That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun for me because especially like I hadn't seen the trolley picture before and all the old cars.
All right, well, thank you, Nancy.
Well, thank you.
All right.